Imagine living in a country where once abundant opportunities have dwindled to shadows of their former selves. Canada, once celebrated as a prosperous neighbor, now faces a stark reality that has citizens feeling trapped in an unending cycle of despair. Over the past decade, the glow of success has faded, and more than half of the population senses the weight of their nation's decline, powerless to change the course of this crisis. The housing market is a ticking time bomb, costs are spiraling out of control while salaries barely keep pace. Families find themselves squeezed by mounting bills, and the once firm grip on secure jobs is loosening, leaving them with a perilous future. While inflation and housing issues are hot topics across the globe, Canada's situation is a labyrinth of complexity. For generations, wages kept up with housing expenses, and dreams of homeownership were within reach. Yet, since the early 2000s, a sharp divide has emerged. While wages stagnate, housing prices soar, driven by an influx of global investment and artificial demand. The result? Declining homeownership rates that have dropped steadily since 2011. The millennial generation, now in their 40s, is increasingly relegated to a rental market that seems to taunt them with its exorbitant prices. As vacancy rates across the nation hit a staggering low of just 1.5%, major cities like Toronto and Vancouver have become battlegrounds for housing. With average rents surpassing $3,000 for a single-bedroom apartment, hundreds vie for the same living space. The competition is fierce. And the pool of affordable housing has dwindled to less than 1%. The casualties of this crisis are everywhere. Tens of thousands now live in their cars, resorting to makeshift arrangements with roommates or relying on credit cards to scrape by. In British Columbia alone, securing a home now costs nearly double the province's minimum wage. The struggle is palpable. Essentials like food and transportation take a backseat to housing needs for many low-income workers. Yet, amid the chaos, outside observers might notice the facade of growth, propped up by an illusion of prosperity. Canada's population has exploded with a stampede of immigrants, 1.2 million in a single year. From a distance, it seems the economy is thriving. But in reality, per capita incomes are stagnant, and the government has swollen, choking small businesses and the middle class under layers of red tape and skyrocketing living costs. In a world that embraced its geographic wealth, from oil to natural resources, Canada now sees echoes of past successes becoming haunting reminders of fragility. The boom that built its reputation provided a thriving middle class and a strong social safety net, but the relentless march of automation and dwindling traditional jobs has brought new depths of inequality, exposing millions to job losses and income declines. The critical question arises: what's the path to recovery? With housing shortages and demand surging, Canada stands at a crossroads. Will the country gallantly rise from the ashes of a broken system, or will it succumb to the pressure of an ever-increasing divide? The clock is ticking. And the fire extinguisher might be nowhere in sight. Previously, we explored how the rental market in Canada has become a brutal battleground. Tens of thousands now live in their cars, cram into shared apartments, or drown in credit card debt just to survive. The affordable housing options shrink to less than 1%, pushing the most vulnerable to the edge. But what happens when even minimum wage workers must spend almost twice their earnings just to rent a modest home? In British Columbia, this grim reality has become a harsh truth. Imagine working full-time, yet having to sacrifice food, healthcare, or transportation just to pay rent. The balance has shattered. The simple security of a roof over your head now demands impossible choices. Yet, if you glance at Canada's big economic numbers, you might be fooled into thinking all is well. The truth? Much of this growth is smoke and mirrors. Why? Because Canada's population has exploded by over 1.2 million people in just 1 year, mainly fueled by immigration. From a distance, the economy looks swollen. But dig deeper, and per capita income hasn't budged since 2018. It's frozen in time. Meanwhile, government payrolls are ballooning. In British Columbia alone, public employment surged by nearly 23% since 2020, swelling bureaucracy and increasing the tax burden on already squeezed households. As families struggle with soaring costs, the expanding maze of taxes, fees, and regulations choke small businesses and the middle class. The air gets thinner for those trying to keep their heads above water. To grasp the full scope of Canada's current employment and economic challenges, we must rewind to the country's roots of prosperity. Canada's rise was once fueled by its vast natural wealth. Stretching across the world's second-largest landmass, it was a treasure trove of oil, natural gas, and minerals. The boom in Alberta's oil sands attracted technology, capital, and fierce competition for leases and royalties. Thousands of skilled and semi-skilled jobs blossomed, and industries like transportation and infrastructure surged alongside them. But this resource rush wasn't just about profits. It funded massive investments in education, healthcare, and urban development. Services grew, the middle class expanded, and Canada earned its reputation for high living standards and a strong social safety net. By the early 2000s, the economy transformed, diversified, driven by services, manufacturing, and natural resources like many other developed nations. Yet, the very sectors that sparked growth now reveal cracks beneath the surface. What seemed like a sturdy foundation is showing signs of fragility. How long can a country rely on volatile resource markets and shifting global trends before the house of cards begins to fall? The next chapter exposes the fragile illusions hiding behind Canada's economic facade, and the looming storm threatening to upend everything. The narrative paints a compelling picture of a nation caught in a web of economic challenges, as Canada's vibrant history turns turbulent. Throughout the 2000s, the Canadian economy blossomed into a diverse blend of services, manufacturing, and natural resources. This growth led to significant investments in education and healthcare, establishing a social safety net that bolstered the middle class. But the very sectors that once propelled prosperity are now revealing alarming vulnerabilities. Oil and gas job numbers, which reached a peak in 2014, took a significant hit leading up to the pandemic, plummeting by 23%. The unpredictable nature of crude oil prices, Canada's essential export, hit hard, contrasting sharply with the resilience shown during the 2008 financial crisis. As traditional resource-driven jobs shrank, a troubling shift began. Automation took over manufacturing, mining, and agriculture, pushing manual jobs aside in favor of robots and algorithms. Rural communities like Newfoundland, parts of Quebec, and rural Ontario suffered deeply from this change. Limited access to education and retraining programs left many without options. Inequality began to rise again, as those unable to afford the transition faced job losses and shrinking incomes. As if these economic pressures weren't enough, Canada's geography adds another layer of complexity. A staggering 80% of Canadians reside in a narrow corridor near the United States border, with Ontario generating nearly 38% of the nation's GDP. This concentration means that any disruption, be it minor supply delays or rising land costs, can send housing markets into a frenzy, driving prices beyond the reach of average Canadians. In remote regions, lack of investment in infrastructure only exacerbates the situation. With half the country battling supply shocks and the other half facing an investment void, the housing crisis has deepened. Imagine the echoing silence of vacant homes as families struggle to find affordable living spaces. Yet the question looms larger: if the system has been breached, is there a way to mend the cracks before they break wide open? As we delve deeper into this crisis, what will unravel next? Stay tuned for the shocking truths about housing instability that lie just beneath the surface. Let's quickly catch up. The Southern Corridor's tight grip on Canada's economy means any hiccup in land prices or building permits can send home costs skyrocketing. Meanwhile, the North and remote interiors face a different beast. Lack of financing and infrastructure kills investors' appetite. Now, half the nation wrestles with supply shocks while the other half suffers from an investment drought. The housing catastrophe isn't a mystery, it boils down to a handful of failures. The nation simply isn't building enough homes fast enough. First-time buyers are trapped behind soaring financial walls, needing incomes far beyond average, or handouts from their families, the infamous mom and dad banks. Population growth fans the flames, pushing demand higher. The storm has been brewing for over 20 years. Vancouver and Toronto have always flirted with high prices, but recently, they exploded. Picture this: buying a typical home in Toronto demands an eye-popping annual household income near $280,000. Yet, most Canadians earn just over $120,000 a year. A cruel gap, a fantasy for many. Debt has become the lifeline. Total household debt now hits 184% of disposable income. Imagine for every dollar a family earns after taxes, nearly $2 are owed. Debt isn't just a choice anymore. Credit cards and loans sneak into daily life like an inescapable fog. The supply side? Grim. Compared to peers, Canada's housing stock is sparse, only around 424 units for every 10,000 people. That means finding a home to rent or buy has turned into a brutal lottery. And as the few affordable places vanish, the rest demand more income than ever. Saving for a down payment drags on for 15 years on average, decades in the pockets of hopeful renters. Rental listings have nosedived since 2020. New home completions linger in the mere tens of thousands each year nationwide. But here's the paradox: immigration surges keep adding new residents, vital to keeping the economy alive, yet fueling price hikes. The pressure on rents and housing doesn't stop there. Universities swell with students, from 240,000 in 2011 to nearly 900,000 in 2023, ripping rents higher in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. So, while newcomers drive Canada's heartbeat forward, the country's housing is choking on its own flaws. The question isn't just how to pay for housing, but how to untangle this complex web before the whole system snaps. What happens when the lifeline of migration becomes the weight dragging the country down? The next chapter might reveal a shocking twist. In the years leading up to 2023, the landscape of Canada had begun to shift dramatically. The surge of immigration had turned the country into a magnet for talent, with the number of international students skyrocketing from 240,000 in 2011 to almost 900,000 by 2023. This surge, however, came at a cost. Campus cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal could hardly keep up, and the relentless pressure on housing prices reached new extremes. But that wasn't all. As the population swelled, the impact was felt beyond housing. The strain on vital infrastructure, healthcare, education, and transportation became undeniable. Local governments, often reacting too late, tightened conditions for housing development, yet the supply remained woefully inadequate. Housing and rental costs were merely the tip of the iceberg, masking deeper issues beneath the surface. Rising costs permeated every aspect of life. Basic services buckled under oligopolistic control, with telecom subscriptions ranked among the highest globally. Canadians found themselves grappling with banking fees that outstripped those seen in countries like Australia, tight profit margins squeezing their finances like a vice. As a result, a staggering 66% of citizens reported feeling financially trapped, pushing pivotal life milestones like homeownership and starting families further into the future. Yet, the narrative didn't just arise from within. External forces loomed larger, reshaping the landscape like unseen puppeteers. Globalization, built on free trade and fluid supply chains, started to unravel. Decisions from the United States regarding tariffs, especially on softwood lumber, sent shockwaves through the economy. Compounding this were the European Union's border carbon regulations and geopolitical tensions, which exacerbated trade routes and inflated construction costs. In Canada, shipping congestion at ports like Vancouver and Prince Rupert and the scarcity of containers drove prices higher and higher for essential materials, cement, steel, appliances, and glass soared in cost. Every ripple in global trade reverberated through the heart of Canadian homes, changing what once seemed like a right into an unattainable dream. This was not just a tale of economic metrics, it was a story of real people trapped beneath the weight of a crumbling system, struggling to find their place in a shifting world. The looming question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire: what resilience remains when the foundations of your dreams are soaked in uncertainty? Previously, we saw how congestion at Vancouver and Prince Rupert ports, scarce containers, soaring insurance premiums, and rising freight costs sent the prices of crucial building materials, cement, steel, mechanical equipment, appliances, and glass through the roof. These supply chain snarls have tightened the grip on Canada's housing market, pushing affordability to a breaking point. Now, let's zoom in on the energy sector, where oil and liquefied gas exports fuel not only the United States but also booming Asian markets. Yet, every step down the supply chain, pipelines, terminals, refineries, and tanker routes has become a costly bottleneck. Imagine the echoes of global trade's turbulence reverberating all the way to the kitchen table, inflating everyday living expenses. It's like a fragile glass shattering under pressure, but where is the fire extinguisher to stop the flames? The urgent answer lies in one place: increasing housing supply. But this is not a simple build more slogan. It demands dismantling outdated zoning laws that block high-density and mixed-use developments. Local communities often resist change, clinging to nostalgia and fear. Streamlining permit processes through digital innovation could cut months off bureaucratic delays. Yet, without tight coordination between federal, provincial, and municipal levels, these efforts risk stalling. Housing policy remains one of Canada's most tangled, fragmented challenges. But there is hope. Around the globe, cities have cracked this code. Linking zoning rights to transit corridors encourages growth where it makes sense. Public land can be leased long-term to create social housing that stays affordable. Modular and industrialized construction methods promise faster, cheaper building without sacrificing quality. Still, these tools alone won't fix everything. Housing finance and production are just pieces of a larger puzzle. True revival demands a holistic urban strategy, massive investments in water, sewage, electricity, broadband, and transit networks. Health and education systems must expand alongside. Workforce reskilling programs are essential to prepare Canadians for tomorrow's jobs. Imagine a 10-year plan that cuts down payments, saving times dramatically. Picture vacancy rates rising, easing the rental crunch, and the share of income spent on housing falling back to reasonable levels. But none of this can happen without a solid financial framework supporting it all. Is Canada ready to break free from this cycle, or will it watch the glass shatter further, powerless to act? The clock is ticking. Canada stands at a crossroads, faced with a pressing need to activate change. Equipped with vast human, natural, and institutional resources, it has the potential to rise again. But a sluggish housing supply, dwindling productivity, and stifled competition could plunge the nation deeper into economic despair. The daily struggle for affordable living looms larger. Young people are seeing homeownership as a distant dream, overshadowed by mounting rents fueled by inadequate wages. The moment has come for Canada to shatter the glass protecting its ambitions and pull the fire extinguisher on this escalating crisis. Change must be sparked now. Will Canada rise to the call, or will this moment slip away? As the looming shadows of economic stagnation and rising living costs darken the doorsteps of its citizens, it's apparent that action can no longer be delayed. Are you prepared for what comes next? What will Canada choose, action or complacency? Canada stands on the brink of a profound transformation, teetering between its once celebrated prosperity and a daunting reality that leaves many feeling powerless. Once viewed as a thriving neighbor to the United States, Canada is now grappling with a myriad of challenges that threaten to overshadow its achievements. Imagine a country where over 85% of trade with the U.S. operates tariff-free, yet beneath this seemingly advantageous surface lies a stark dilemma. Picture the alarm bells ringing, a glass shatters, signaling an urgent need for change. Canadians find themselves facing a precarious housing market, skyrocketing bills, and vanishing job security, leading to a tangled web of despair. Today, a significant number of Canadians reportedly feel trapped in a downward spiral, overshadowed by inflation and a housing crisis that feels insurmountable. The question arises, how did Canada, once a beacon of hope, arrive at this point? The answer lies deeper than mere numbers. Wages, once keeping pace with housing costs, have stagnated. Meanwhile, the soaring prices of homes have pushed dreams of ownership further out of reach, with the nation's homeownership rates declining since 2011. The rental market is so congested that average monthly rents in cities like Toronto and Vancouver have exploded to $3,000, leaving countless individuals competing for sparse housing options. Amid these troubling developments, an unanticipated twist surfaces: household debts have soared to an alarming 184% of disposable income, forcing families to navigate a treacherous landscape of credit cards and loans just to make ends meet. As the affordability of basic necessities dwindles, how does one make sense of a future where financial stability has become a distant dream? Yet, the story doesn't end here. Canada's population growth, propelled by immigration, presents both a boon and a bane. With a record influx of newcomers, the demand for housing escalates, driving rents higher and placing immense pressure on essential infrastructures like healthcare and education. As the demands of a growing population clash with dwindling job opportunities, it raises a chilling question: are Canadians caught in a web of their own making, engineered by rapidly evolving economic forces? To navigate out of this crisis, Canada must not only enhance housing supply but also rejuvenate its economic foundations. Innovative credit programs for first-time buyers, alongside tax credits to alleviate rent-to-income pressure, could offer glimmers of hope. But can these initiatives materialize effectively amidst widespread discontent? Moreover, a revitalization of education and industry collaborations is vital for securing high-value job growth in sectors devastated by automation. As the nation grapples with its identity and future, the harsh realities remain clear. The urgent need for transparency and competition resonates deeply, as the established structures of telecommunications and banking impose burdensome costs on consumers. Can Canada dismantle these imposing barriers and cultivate a transparent economic environment that nurtures growth while ensuring fair opportunities for all? With the clock ticking, the question echoes: if we have shattered the glass of complacency, where is the fire extinguisher to extinguish the flames of crisis? The answers lie ahead, cloaked in uncertainty but promising the potential for recovery and resilience. The narrative begins with Canada facing a pressing and complex crisis, one that may catch many off guard. Over 85% of trade between Canada and the United States is now tariff-free, but what lies beneath this seemingly beneficial surface? As the economy thrums with activity, an alarm bell is sounding. A metaphorical glass has shattered, signaling the urgency of the situation. Canadians who once cherished their nation's reputation for prosperity and livability now feel an ache of powerlessness as their security unravels. Imagine waking up to find your financial stability slipping away, as the housing market ticks like a time bomb. Bills rise swiftly against stagnating salaries while secure jobs fade from existence. The narrative characterizes a nation caught in the throes of desire and desperation. The echoes of words like inflation and housing crisis resonate through town hall discussions, but the reality grips Canadians in a more complicated web. As wages lag behind soaring housing costs, the dream of homeownership fades for many. With rents in cities like Toronto and Vancouver soaring to nearly $3,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, desperation mounts. Who could compete with hundreds of applicants for the same unit? The horrifying truth unfolds: a country where tens of thousands now live in their vehicles, relying on makeshift arrangements and credit cards to cover essentials. A painful realization strikes: in British Columbia, you need nearly twice the minimum wage to afford an average home, pushing basic needs like food and healthcare aside in this cruel prioritization of survival. From a distance, the economy might appear bloated and thriving, with a staggering growth of 1.2 million people flocking to the nation in a single year. But beneath this facade lies stagnation, a per capita income trapped at 2018 levels. The state of the economy feels like a balloon so full it could burst at any moment, a false sense of prosperity hanging perilously over the vulnerable. Yet in the midst of this struggle, hope flickers. There are solutions, albeit challenging ones. Targeted credit guarantee programs for first-time home buyers and tax initiatives to lower the rent-to-income ratios could pave the way for recovery. Shortening down payment savings to 10 years may alleviate some pressure, encouraging more vacancy rates in the rental market. However, every solution demands courage. Sometimes radical decisions must breach the surface for genuine change. Can Canada reposition its production base effectively? The path forward defies simplicity. High-value manufacturing and innovation in clean technologies may be crucial for job creation, especially in regions ravaged by automation. Education reform and incentivizing R&D could turn the tides, nurturing a workforce ready for a new era. As the story unfolds, the focus shifts toward how emerging sectors like hydrogen and battery technology could bridge the energy gap and open new markets in regions like the Indo-Pacific and Europe. The narrative emphasizes the need for transparency and competition, vital pillars to regaining balance and fostering consumer welfare. Could it be that the solution is not merely economic restructuring but a fundamental shift in how Canada approaches its challenges? Can an adaptable society harness its profound potential and build a future where individuals no longer feel crushed under the weight of uncertainty? The question lingers in the air, and it's clear: in Canada's quest for rejuvenation, every step taken may lead to the promise of hope, or the threat of further ruin.